What are your recollections about Mwai Kibaki? What do you think he'll be remembered most for?
I think he'll be remembered most for being the president after 28 years of President Mwai, 24 years of President Mwai. That there was the return to a more regular elections and a regular transfer of power.
Did you listen to the Hot Breakfast this morning?
Here's what you missed. Peter Maddens, who was a young man when he first came to Kenya. His dad was ambassador back in the day, and he remembers former President Mwai Kibaki very well. In fact, I think you were in school with some of his kids, weren't you, Ambassador? Welcome to Hot 96.
Good morning, Jeff.
Good morning,
Nick. How are you guys? Thanks very much for having me. Yeah,
very timely. Go on.
I was a 16, 17-year-old kid when we moved to Kenya and was at St. Mary's. And there were other kids there too. So and the former president, then Minister of Finance and later Vice President, was one of the parents at the school.
And there was a prize day when he was the chief guest, right?
But everybody's seen that picture, right? the picture of the then vice president giving the history prize to the head boy at the time, or at least one of the prefects. I don't remember if he was head boy, but it was President Kenyatta. Yeah.
Look at that.
Wow.
Small world, huh?
Small world.
What are your recollections about Mwai Kibaki? What do you think he'll be remembered most for?
I think he'll be remembered most for being the president after 28 years of President Mwai, 24 years of President Mwai. That there was the return to a more regular elections and a regular transfer of power, which I think is one of the hallmarks of a functioning democracy. So I think that's probably one of the thing that he'll be remembered most for. Obviously, as minister of in various departments from a very young age. I think he was a very young minister in Mzee Kenyatta's government. Obviously, he's been part of Kenya's political landscape since independence, right up until today. You can see even now in the memorials at his passing, you can see what an influence the man has been on this country, and still actually is. So, he's one of these pillars in this country that has passed. I think obviously everything has to do with age, of course. Mm-hmm. So a lot of these guys are going to be passing, and a lot have passed already. And it gives us a chance to remember and to remember how a democracy works and how a democracy should work and how a country like Kenya needs to develop.
Ambassador, I'd like to because a lot of clips are circulating from him back in the day and showing his brilliance as an economist and someone who's gone to school. Do you feel like we've lost the track in terms of getting leaders who are as brilliant as that one? In terms of expressing themselves and implementing what they say they will do?
That's not a problem just in Kenya.
Oh, you have the same problem in Belgium.
I think that's an issue worldwide. Yeah, that public service is no longer considered. Let me put it this way: the public service can no longer attract the best and the brightest from university or from higher education as it could 2 generations ago, and I think we're suffering for that.
Yeah, I don't know if you were around during President Daniel Arap Moi's state funeral.
No,
you weren't around for that.
No,
but you were there when President Jomo Kenyatta died.
Yeah,
you were around for that.
Yeah,
and now there's another state.
Yeah.
You're probably one of the very few ambassadors who witnessed
more than one state funeral.
Very few.
If not the
I don't know. There may be 1 or 2 who were here as first secretaries at President Moi's funeral, or within the embassy, and now come back as ambassador. There's a couple who've come back, but I don't think there's anybody who remembers who was here when Jomo Kenyatta was president.
78. That's right. You weren't even born.
No, I wasn't born. Oh. I hadn't even been conceptualized. Leave alone.
Conceptualized. I like the verb.
I'm such an amazing person. They had to just create a concept first.
But Lozi, your thoughts about how the country has come together? It's amazing. Like the other day, you could see in the tension in political rallies, and now all of a sudden, it's like the tension has just gone down.
My problem with that is I've only been here since August, so it's difficult for me to read that barometric. But absolutely, I think one of the things that I've at least noticed in my 9 months here is how is the increased political maturity. Yes, there were tensions at the rallies, but those kind of tensions are absolutely normal. But from what I've seen or from what I've observed from a distance in the past, because you grow up here, and anytime you see Kenya in a headline in the press, wherever you are in the world, this is part of being a diplomat. Where the countries that you've lived in, the headlines resonate, and you pick them up in the newspaper. If I read a newspaper today and I see a headline about, I don't know, Malaysia or Vietnam, where I haven't lived, I'll pass over it. If I see a headline about Venezuela or Argentina or Tanzania, I'll read it because it's countries that I've lived in. And the same has happened over the years with Kenya. If anything, in the last 9 months that I've seen, the degree of political maturity has increased. The rallies become tense, yes. But I think, and I may be reading this wrong, but I think if you go back 10, 15 years, those rallies that were tense it'd be much easier for them to flip into violence.
Yeah.
And that's not the case anymore. And I think that's a measure of an increased maturity in the political system here in Kenya.
Yeah.
Political rallies are always going to be tense. I mean, you look anywhere in the world. You look at the French elections. You look at what happens in the States. You look at what happens in my country. When you have big political rallies, you're going to have tension, and it's part of the atmosphere, right? To rile up the crowd. It's what these public speakers feed on. But for that to flip into violence, that's a step that I think Kenya has now grown beyond.
Yeah, speaking of violence, Kibaki's presidency will always be that blot of post-election violence. Everyone remembers, the late swearing in on that December day, 2007, and then after that, it was all under his watch. He will always be judged by that.
I think that's one element in the bigger package. Yes, absolutely. The bigger package being, of course, the fact that he was such an important member of the ruling class, if you can call it that, for so long. His work in the economy in the 70s, and later as you know, his role in free primary education. I think there's many things in his legacy that belong to his legacy. Let's put it that way. You can't deny that 2007 is one of the bullets. If you have to make a list of everything you think of when you think of Mwai Kibaki as a political leader in this country, there's many issues, and one of them is 2007, absolutely. But I don't think it's the overriding element in the analysis of Mwai Kibaki as a political personality in Kenya. It's one of them. You can't deny it. That's true. But there's much more.
Absolutely.
Maybe that blame can be shared because maybe as much as he was sworn in late at night, it's other people who rallied each other to execute what happened.
Yeah, I mean,
like a shared responsibility, maybe.
Yes, I mean, violence isn't that kind of violence isn't just one person.
Right,
it is never just one person.
Absolutely. But the thing is, and I guess it happens around the world. People judge you so unfairly when you're alive, but the minute you're dead, everyone's there praising you. Everyone's there quick to praise. I guess it's normal around the world.
That's human.
Yeah.
But that also is human, right?
Yeah.
Can anybody go through life and say that it's been totally consistent his whole life along? There's left turns, right turns, U-turns.
Absolutely. And speaking of U-turns, we're a little over 3 months to the next general election. And you say Kenya has matured. So since you were a young man here, 17, 18 years old, you have seen a different Kenya.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
What's the biggest change?
The economic development is by far the biggest change. I think also in the political space, it's there's a lot more room for debate. and the debate is vibrant. Without, and this is the last 15 years, I think, without resorting to violence. I think this country has made a remarkable evolution over the last generation or generation and a half. Absolutely.
How are campaigns run in Belgium? For us, like sometimes you might feel like we concentrate too much on promises that we don't exceed. But you said that politicians are the same globally. But in terms of campaigns, is it like a big distraction from everyday living back in your country?
Well, the main difference between our system and the Kenyan or Anglo-Saxon system is that we don't have first past the post elections. We have proportional representation in Parliament, so that makes that every government is a coalition government, which obviously plays into the calculations that politicians make before the elections. So the campaigns become something completely different. There's the compromise built into the formation of a coalition government begins even before the election. So the campaigns are completely different. It's very difficult to compare them, I think.
Yeah, but the thing you just mentioned the French elections a moment ago, Belosi. It seems like they were just campaigning for maybe 3-4 weeks maximum, and
Macron was campaigning for only 3 weeks,
like literally
1 week before the first round and the 2 weeks between the two rounds.
Right,
and 3 weeks of campaigns.
That's it. And Kenya were always in politics mode.
It's 5 years. Like as soon as the president sits sworn in, the next person starts campaigning for the next.
Well, that goes from country to country. I mean, you have that. Like in the States, it's the same thing. They're constantly in campaign mode as well. Except, of course, that they have the midterm election. So the cycles are only 2 years. But that's the nature. I guess that's the nature of a society. You're very political. You talk a lot about politics. So obviously that plays into the way the politicians interact with society in general.
Do you think like being a political country destabilizes the socioeconomic path it should take? Because
does it? Look at the development here. It's a vibe, the vibrance, the fact that the debate is as vibrant as it is here, I think is more of a good thing. And it obviously it leads to decision making being more laborious, and certain decisions being more difficult to take. Absolutely. But there's nothing wrong with a vibrant debate.
Last week we had Russian ambassador here, and he claims, according to the Russians, it's just a special military operation happening in Ukraine. Ambassador, you have very different views and perspectives.
Yeah, I do. First of all, I want to call it a war on Ukraine, not a war in Ukraine. 20 years ago, I spent a few years at the OSCE, the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe, and I think I saw what the Russian perspective is of its place in Europe. And I want to believe that I understand that any conversation needs to take account of both parties' perceptions of reality. But in this case, I don't think that's happening anymore. Perceiving the EU and NATO as aggressors is wrong. The EU is a peace project. If you had to define the European Union or the European project with one word, it would be the word peace. And NATO is a defensive alliance. So the basis for the invasion, this is weeks back, months back, is actually bogus. And we diplomats don't use those words lightly. We actually never use that kind of words, but it's been 2 generations since we've seen this kind of, and I'm doing air quotes here, special military operation on our continent. We didn't build the longest period of peace on the European continent just to see it destroyed by the perceptions of one man. We've been there, we've done that. We spent way too much energy for it ever to happen again. So when Ukraine was invaded, we had 3 choices. We could do nothing, we could wage all-out war, or we could try alternative diplomatic or economic means. And doing nothing was never an option. All-out war hardly ever is. So we had to try alternative means, and that's what we did. There's another aspect to this whole thing, and that's the disinformation and the fact that the free and serious press and social media channels here, including here in Kenya, have been abused as a platform for dissemination of disinformation on the war being waged against Ukraine. Claiming that the alternative narrative can't find its way into Western-dominated media, which is, I think, a direct quote of people speaking for Russia, I think is an insult to you guys, to you, the free press, because your freedom is a backbone of our societies. We don't harass journalists for calling this invasion a war. We don't jail journalists for reporting on facts as they see them, instead of as the government would want them to be seen. Here in Kenya, you've experienced the press being subjected to government control. And if alternative narratives do exist and are anywhere close to the truth, the free press will report on them and be allowed to report on them. Much more importantly, if the alternative narratives are bogus, the free press will be able to say so in our countries, and they'll be able to say so by you, the free press and the responsible press. There was an article a couple of days ago where Mr. Makismichev claimed that the current food crisis has nothing to do with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, that it's a failure of Western globalization. I think I'm quoting him here. But you know, when the world's breadbasket, which Ukraine is being invaded, when thousands of civilians are driven into shelters or killed in indiscriminate bombing, you really can't be surprised that there's disruption in the food markets.
Yeah, Belozi, someone, you asked the question, as the European Union, do you feel helpless when you see the pictures that we do see on TV? Do you feel more could be done? Because it's been since February 24th. We're now, what, April 27th? Or 26th, 27th?
Well, like I was saying,
2 months later.
There were three options. Do nothing, wage war, or look for alternative means. And we're not going to wage war, or at least we're going to avoid it as long as we can to wage war. We're not going to do nothing. So the only thing we could do was try alternative methods of diplomacy and economic sanctions. Now, they don't work in a day or a week. They take a little bit of time. That's obvious. And that's exactly what's happening now. If you look at the sanctions that we've put in place and what the consequences are of those sanctions. First of all, the sanctions are having an effect. That's clear. Secondly, it has been 40 years since we've been as steadfast and as unified on sanctions anywhere in the world as European, as a European global player. I think the last time we were this unified and we were this strong with sanctions was against the apartheid regime in South Africa. So, our alliance has become stronger. Nobody's questioning NATO's raison d'etre anymore. And Eurosceptics are losing elections all over Europe. So if anything, this has made us stronger. But the effects are not immediate.
Yeah.
And it will always take a little bit of time. My roots, my personal roots, lie in Western Belgium, where World War I was fought. My grandfather, by the time he was 50, because he was born in 1900, by the time he was 50, which is, a little bit younger than we are, right, Jeff?
Yeah.
By the time he was 50, he'd rebuilt Belgium twice. He was 18 when World War I ended, and 45 when World War II ended. That generation rebuilt our country twice. So you're not going to tell me that I don't know in my DNA. I didn't live it personally, but an aversion to war is baked into my DNA. Doesn't make me a pacifist. But to see what's happening on my continent today, and to see and to compare it to the last time that happened, is something that I'm not going to let happen. And if that means, and I'm gonna fight it with everything I have in my power, and with everything that my job allows me to have. And one of those things is the making sure that we do this without having to resort to war and without having to do nothing. So we put in alternative measures. We do it with economic and diplomatic sanctions. And I'm going to fight the disinformation.
Will he be, at the end of his term, if he ever gets an end of term, be facing similar charges like the ones of Omar al-Bashir, like crimes against humanity? Would he be put to test and have to, pay for these things that have happened?
That's what the international criminal justice system is for. So
at some point he'll have to.
The international criminal justice system exists. At some point, it will be put in motion, and it's already gathering all kinds of evidence for the case. If in the future there is a case to be presented, the evidence will have been gathered.
Yeah. Did you ever think, like you say, like your family lived through this, through two generations, and now when you see close to 5 million refugees streaming across the border into Romania, into Hungary, into Germany, UK, I mean, these are scenes that you would never have imagined in your lifetime.
Nope.
In Europe.
No, that's true. That's true. Absolutely. I mean, what is it? 4.8 million, 5 million refugees, and something like, a multiple of that in displaced persons. Because don't forget, there's also people within Ukraine that are displaced. No, we never would have imagined it. We thought, and maybe there was a degree of naivete there. We thought that the system we put up, or that our fathers' generations put up, was going to protect us from this kind of thing happening on our continent. Like I said, the European project. If you had to summarize the European project in one word, it would be the word peace. Not integration, not common market, not cooperation. No, peace. So let me put it this way. Like I said, there was probably a degree of naivete in feeling that we were protected against this, but it just goes to show how fragile it all is, and how important it is to make sure that it really does not ever happen again.
Yeah, and nobody saw this coming in 2014 when Russia, quote unquote, annexed Crimea. I mean, didn't anyone see this coming? Or is
there's a difference between seeing it coming and wanting to see it coming. Maybe nobody wanted to see it coming, and couldn't believe that it would go this far. I'm just shrugging my shoulders.
Sure.
There's nothing more that I can do.
Yeah, and the more long drawn out it becomes, the worse it becomes. I mean, how do you untangle all of this?
Yeah, good question. Ain't I happy that I'm here in Kenya?
At this time, yes.